Imagine that you traveled back to the fall of 2018 and you asked someone, hey, who's the best running back in the NFL? Chances are they'd respond with something along the lines of Todd Gurley is the best running back in the NFL right now, and you decide to check out his stats and you see why people think that. You even stick around for a football Sunday and you turn on a Rams game and you watch Todd Gurley, and that just proves their point even more. All you can say is, damn, that guy is amazing. You then decide to travel back to present day, November of 2021 as I record this, and you ask yourself, hey, I wonder what TG3 is doing now. You decided to see where he is now, and you see that the guy is a free agent who last year only had 678 rushing yards. What happened to him? Well, how did he go from an all-pro running back to a free agent who is yet to sign with an NFL team? That's what we're going to be exploring in today's video as we talk about the rise and fall of Todd Gurley. Before we get started though, please go ahead and like the video if you enjoyed, as it really helps out the channel. I worked really hard on this, so it would truly mean a lot to me if this video did well, and liking it is going to help it do a lot better in the YouTube algorithm. And also subscribe if you guys are new and you guys enjoy videos like this so you don't miss out on any new videos. Plus, we're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and once we hit our goal, I am finally going to do a face reveal. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get this video started. Todd was born in Baltimore, Maryland, but he would end up moving to Tarboro, North Carolina, a town that's an hour east of Raleigh, and as a kid, he'd spend his childhood there and he would attend Tarboro High School. He was a pretty athletic kid to say the least, and he would play football, basketball, and track in high school. In football, he'd obviously play as a running back and even a defensive back, and in his junior season, he'd record 1,472 rushing yards and 26 rushing touchdowns on offense, and on the other side of the ball, he'd record 79 tackles, 1 interception, and 1 forced fumble. And as I mentioned before, he was also a basketball player and in high school as well. And in his junior season, he would average 11 points per game and 8 rebounds per game. Gurley, he was also a track star, as I said before, and he actually competed for Team USA in the 110-meter hurdles at the 2011 World Youth Championships in athletics. And there, he'd placed third in prelims with a time of 13.66 seconds, and he also finished second in NCHSAA 2A state track meet in the 100-meter dash with a time of 10.7 seconds. I don't know a lot about track, but I'm assuming that's pretty good. The point is, he was very athletic. Now, switching back to his high school football career, in his senior year, he'd put up video game numbers of 2,600 rushing yards and 38 rushing touchdowns. And to cap it all off, he helped lead his school to a victory in the 2A North Carolina State Championship and had a stellar performance, recording 242 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns in that game. Now, according to 24/7 Sports, coming out of high school, Todd, he was a 4-star recruit, and he was the 6th best running back in the nation, and he was the 56th best player overall in the country, and he'd receive offers from Georgia, Clemson, North Carolina State, Auburn, and Duke, but eventually he'd settle on the Georgia Bulldogs. Todd's freshman season with the Dogs was great to say the least. He went off for 1,385 rushing yards, 17 rushing touchdowns, and he averaged 6 yards a carry. Seriously, that's some crazy ass stuff right there. To make his stats and play even more impressive, he didn't even start in 2 of the 14 games in which he played in. His debut was amazing, as despite being the backup, he had 8 rushes for 100 yards, 1 rushing touchdown, and a kickoff return touchdown versus Buffalo. Now, some other notable performances would include a 130-yard, 2-touchdown performance versus Vanderbilt, a 130-yard, 3-touchdown performance versus Tennessee, and a 118 1-touchdown performance versus the rival Florida Gators. Now, the Bulldogs, they would finish with a 12-2 record, and that was good for best in the SEC East, and they would meet Alabama in the SEC championship game. TG3, he would have an amazing game with 122 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. But Georgia, they would fall just short, losing 28-32. They would face Nebraska in the Capital One Bowl, and they would in fact win that match. And in that game, Todd would have 23 carries, 125 yards, and a score. That year, he would tie the record for the third most rushing touchdowns in a single year in school history, finished second in rushing yards in the SEC, and was named to the first team All-SEC. It was a truly astounding season for Todd and the Dogs. Now, obviously, heading into his sophomore year, he was looking to have another great season, and to open up the year, he had a spectacular game versus Clemson with 12 rushes, 154 yards, and 2 scores on the ground. Unfortunately, Georgia, they wouldn't be able to get past the Tigers, and they lost 38-35. Now, the following week versus South Carolina, he'd go off for 30 rushes, 132 yards, and a score, plus an 8-yard receiving touchdown. Two more notable performances I do want to highlight is a match against Florida, in which he had 17 carries, 100 rushing yards, and one rushing touchdown, 3 catches, 87 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown, plus a game against Georgia Tech, in which he had 122 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 36 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. The Bulldogs, they finished with an 8-5 record, and that was good for third in the SEC East this time, and they'd meet Nebraska yet again in their bowl game. Todd, he'd put up numbers of 21 carries, 86 rushing yards, 7 catches, 97 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown in that match, but unfortunately, the Dogs, they would come out on the losing end of that game when it was all said and done. Gurley, he would finish the year with 989 rushing yards, 10 rushing touchdowns, averaging 6 yards a run, to go along with 441 receiving yards and 6 receiving touchdowns. Overall, it was a solid season, and when you take into account that he did miss a couple of games in 2013, and he also did add a receiving element to his play, I mean, it was a pretty impressive season. Maybe not quite as good as his freshman year, but overall, very good. 2014 would be his final season with the Bulldogs. He'd have a fantastic start to the season, as in 6 games, he would amass 911 rushing yards, 9 rushing touchdowns, averaged 7 yards a run, and he had 57 receiving yards, and this included a game in which he demolished Clemson with 198 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. All was good until he was suspended indefinitely by the NCAA for making money off his name, which at the time was against the rules. However, the NCAA eventually they decided to change his suspension to just 4 games, and rather than the rest of the season. He came back in a game versus Auburn, but unfortunately in that match he would tear his ACL, and that would be the end of his season and his college career. Heading into the draft that year, there were a lot of concerns about his knee, but plenty of people projected him to be a first-round pick. He was praised for being a super complete back with the ability to run and catch the football, plus he was a guy who could kill you with speed or with strength. His dreams would end up coming true, when at the time, the St. Louis Rams selected him with the 10th overall pick in the 2015 NFL Draft. Now, he would miss the first 3 games of this season before making his NFL debut in Week 3 versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Overall, his rookie year was very good. He'd have 1,106 rushing yards, 10 rushing touchdowns, and averaged 5 yards a carry. That was good enough to be named a Pro Bowler, and he would win Offensive Rookie of the Year. The Rams would finish with a 79 record, and that was good for third in the NFC West. His best games would come against the Packers, the Cardinals, and the Rams, as in each game, he'd have over 140 yards, and he would have 2 rushing touchdowns in the game against Detroit. Overall, he had a really good rookie season for the Rams. Now, the following year, the team would end up relocating to Los Angeles, and heading into his sophomore season, many people expected Todd to take a big leap as a player, given his very good rookie season. But that would not be the case, as Todd would play in all 16 games, but he would fall victim to the sophomore slump with only 885 rushing yards, 6 rushing touchdowns. However, he did also add 327 yards through the air, so that's something, but overall not a very good season for Todd Gurley. And to make things worse for him, the Rams would finish with an abysmal 4-12 record, and they would end up firing head coach Jeff Fisher. Well, that wasn't really a bad thing, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. While Todd did have some decent performances, like a 27 carry, 85 yard, 2 touchdown performance versus Tampa Bay, and a 20 carry, 76 yard, 1 touchdown game versus Miami, and a 23 carry, 72 yard, 1 touchdown game versus Buffalo. It was a pretty mediocre season overall for TG3 and the Rams. Now, the 2017 offseason would be very eventful for LA. They'd hire Washington's offensive coordinator in Sean McVay as their new head coach, and they would make plenty of free agency splashes by signing the likes of offensive tackle Andrew Whitworth and wide receiver Robert Woods. And in the 2017 draft, they would land guys who would become very big contributors to the team in the future, such as wide receiver Cooper Kupp, safety John Johnson, and wide receiver Josh Reynolds. 2017 was a great year for the Rams and Todd Gurley. Los Angeles would drastically improve, finishing 11-5, and they would take the NFC West crown for the first time since 2003. And Sean McVay proved to be one of the best head coaches in the entire league, and Todd himself would have a fantastic season, to say the least, with 1,305 rushing yards, a league-leading 13 rushing touchdowns, averaged 5 yards a run, and another 788 yards and 6 touchdowns through the year. Some of his notable performances that year included a 152 rushing yard, 3 rushing touchdown performance versus the division rival Seattle Seahawks, a 121 rush yard, 94 receiving yard, and 1 receiving touchdown game versus Dallas, and a 118 rushing yard, 94 receiving yard, 2 receiving touchdown game versus Tennessee. McVay's coaching and play calling really helped elevate the team and the players like sophomore quarterback Jared Goff, and of course Todd Gurley. Todd would take home the 2017-18 NFL Offensive Player of the Year, along with being named to the Pro Bowl and the All-Pro First Team. Now, unfortunately, LA's season would end in the wild card round versus the Atlanta Falcons in a 26-13 loss, but it was a great season for Todd and the Rams, to say the least. In the 2018 offseason, the Rams would continue to make splashes in free agency by signing defensive tackle Ndamukong Suh, and they would trade for cornerbacks Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters, and wide receiver Brandon Cooks, and they acquired all 3 via trade. The Rams were looking loaded on paper, and heading into 2018, they were the favorites to win the NFC West heading into the year. Now, along with that, the Rams would hand Todd Gurley a colossal 4-year, $60 million contract extension with $45 million guaranteed as well, and that made him the highest paid running back in league history. The 2018-19 season would be the highest point of Todd Gurley's career, and it would be the high point of the Todd Gurley era in Los Angeles. The Rams would go 13-3, and they were the 2 seed in the NFC. TG3 would continue to dominate, as he'd light up the league with 1,251 rushing yards and a league-leading 17 rushing touchdowns. And to go along with that, he had 580 receiving yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. And it was truly mesmerizing stuff, and he continued to play like the best running back in the NFL. However, something seemed off. He wasn't finishing the runs the same throughout the year, and he just did not look like the same players, despite the fact that he was putting up monstrous numbers. I mean, if you watched the games, you could tell something was slightly off. And along with that, as the regular season progressed, TG3 got a lot less touches than you'd expect, and it was pretty clear something was wrong with him. But the Rams wouldn't reveal what was going on with him, and they refused to put him on the injury report. There were a lot of rumors and speculation around the NFL community on what was going on, but LA, they denied any rumors, and they tried to tell everyone that he was fine. And in the playoffs, it became even more apparent that something was up. In the divisional round versus the Dallas Cowboys, he would receive 16 runs for 115 yards and 1 touchdown, which was a pretty good performance. Plus, the Rams, they would get the dub. But the following week versus New Orleans, TG3 saw hardly any action. He would receive only 4 runs, and he played less snaps than CJ Anderson. Yes, an all-pro, elite running back got only 4 goddamn runs in a game that could decide if they went to the Super Bowl. On the bright side, Los Angeles, they would walk out of NOLA with the win, albeit on one of the biggest botch calls in league history. Now, in the Super Bowl, he was not much of a factor either, only receiving 10 carries for a mere 35 yards and was very ineffective in that game. Los Angeles, they couldn't get much going in that match, and they would fall to my favorite team, the New England Patriots, 13-3, and their season would end in a Super Bowl loss. Later on in the 2019 offseason, it was actually revealed that he suffered a small knee injury all the way back in week 1 of the 2018 NFL year, and he had arthritis in his knees. He decided to tough it out since he had suffered worse knee injuries before, but that knee injury would become worse as time passed. And I get wanting to play through an injury because you might think it's small, but these lingering issues can slowly eat away at you and become super duper serious. Todd, he received a procedure that made sure he was good during the offseason as the 2019 season would roll around, and obviously, after coming off a Super Bowl appearance, the Rams had pretty lofty expectations. They still had most of that squad from the 2018 season, and people expected them to be a top favorite to win it all. And despite the complications around his knees, Gurley still had lofty expectations to be one of the game's best running backs. However, 2019 would be a very underwhelming one for the Rams and would sadly mark the beginning of the end for Todd Gurley. That season, TG3 would rush for a mere 857 yards and 12 touchdowns, and he averaged a mere 3.8 yards a run, which was the second lowest of his career up to that point. And along with that, teams were starting to catch on to the Rams' offensive scheme, and Los Angeles would regress as a result of this, going 9-7, and they would miss the playoffs just one season after making it to one of the most famous sporting events in the entire world. It was a truly forgettable season for LA, and not one that fans of the team would really like to remember. And after this disappointing year from TG3 and the Rams, Los Angeles had a really tough decision to make: cut him and get off his massive contract, or keep him in the hopes that he does bounce back, because hey, it was just one bad season. It was kind of a tough decision, but there were a lot of debates, leading up to free agency that year, but ultimately the Rams, they would choose option A. And on March 19th, 2020, Todd Gurley would be released by the Los Angeles Rams, and the TG3 era in the City of Angels was over. Life after the Rams has really gone downhill for Todd. In April of 2020, he would sign a one-year pact with the Atlanta Falcons as they hoped that maybe he could rebound after a pretty underwhelming season with the Los Angeles Rams. But I'm making this video for a reason, and he would not bounce back. As I alluded to earlier, he would run for only 678 yards, averaged a mere 3.5 yards a carry, and would have 9 touchdowns, and he would split carries with Brian Hill and Ito Smith. When the 2021 offseason would roll around, there were a lot of rumors that maybe he could get signed by a running back needy team, but he wouldn't get a contract, and he's been a free agent ever since. It doesn't look like any team will sign him soon, despite the fact that there are a lot of squads that have pretty banged up backfields. It's truly crazy to see him fall from grace in a matter of years. I feel like a lot of people have forgotten just how good he was in his heyday. Another big takeaway of this entire saga is that it's proved how much the value of the running back position has declined in today's game. Nowadays, the lifespan of star running backs usually is not that long, and the running back by committee approach has become very popular. The shortened lifespan of a running back I mentioned before has also led to teams being super hesitant and careful when it comes to paying their star running backs. Of course, those players, they will get quite a bit of money, but not as much as you might think, and it's truly crazy and sad to see him fall off the top of the mountain just as quickly as he reached the peak. If I had to blame someone in this situation, if I had to, talk about, one root cause for his rise and fall, I think the root cause for his rise and fall is really that knee injury. That knee injury really just screwed him up, and it just slowly ate away at him, and eventually he was just a shell of his former self. And if I had to blame someone in this situation, I'd have to blame the Rams, but also Todd himself. Todd really should have taken this knee injury a lot more serious, and I get that, he had suffered, worse injuries in the past, and I get wanting to play through it, but he really should have taken it a lot more serious. And when the Rams saw something was clearly up, they should have put him on the injury report. I don't know what they were doing. They really should have done it. I get that they really wanted to play him, and if he did sit out more games in the regular season, it really could have screwed up their Super Bowl hopes, and it really would have caused them to lose a lot more regular season games. But they really should have put him on the injury report, so I gotta blame both sides in this situation. But hopefully one day he can revive his NFL career, and maybe a season-long break from football can help his knee get better and will let him get back to 60 to 75% of what he once was, and a team will maybe take a shot on him. All I can say is that I feel pretty bad for Todd Gurley, and hopefully his NFL career is revived one day. But that's all I have to say in today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. It truly means a lot to me. I know today's was a very long one, but it's one that I've been working on for months, and I'm pretty excited to get this video. I was really excited to make this video. But thank you guys so much for watching. As I said before, again, hit that like button if you enjoyed, and also make sure to subscribe and let me know who do you guys want us to see the rise and fall of next. But with that being said, I'm out, you guys.